much, Sir Mark. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I commend my honourable friend for Doncaster for the very level-headed way in which he has introduced this debate. And I think all of us have enormous sympathy for any parent whose child has been bullied at school, whose child has resulted in whose child has ended up with poor mental health as a result of experiences that they've had at school. And as a parent myself, I can completely understand the totally natural instinct to want to withdraw your child into the safety, the bosom, the cocoon of your family, to get them away from that bullying if the school is not able to protect their child from that bullying, or to help stabilise their child's mental health issues. And that is a very real issue which we must absolutely take seriously. And I'm also acutely conscious when we talk about home education, we are talking about a huge spectrum. There are some parents that are incredibly dedicated and do it exceptionally well. And to them, I would just want to say an enormous thank you, for their dedication, for their time, for their sacrifice. And I think that needs the lightest of state supervision and overviews. If those parents are doing a good job, if the child is happy and well adjusted, if the child is learning well, then that is fantastic. And I would say thank you to that family and thank you to the parents. But we do have to be honest. There is a spectrum. And at the other end, there are parents who cannot read or write who are home educating their children. Now, Sir Mark, I believe passionately that every single child has the right to fulfil their God-given potential. I really, really do. And actually, I worry about those children who are not being equipped and with the widest possible education and able to fulfil their full potential. Of course I will, yes.
Thank you for giving way. And he touches on a point that's very, very important in my constituency of Great Grimsby, in that we have now more and more children who are severely absent from school and disappearing from school rolls. And when we find them wandering the street in the middle of the afternoon and we ask them where they are, we're told that they're being homeschooled. And actually, they are now being prey to county lines, to other forms of illegal activity. And their parents or carers quite often are not able to give the kind of teaching and home education. Would you agree with me that that's something we need to look seriously at as well?
Well, I'm extremely grateful to my honourable friend from Grimsby, and I think she raises a very, very important point. And I've seen exactly that in my constituency, school-aged children in and out of shops in the middle of the day. And mine is also an area subject to the terrible scourge of county lines. So there are huge safeguarding concerns and criminal concerns, actually, about what is happening to some of these children that we absolutely need to take seriously. And I know that my concerns are shared by the Education Select Committee, who said recently that the current status quo does not allow the government to say with confidence that a suitable education is provided to every child in the country. I know those concerns are shared by Ofsted, and I know that the Department for Education itself has said, and again I quote, that there is considerable evidence that many children who are home educated are not receiving a suitable education. And I think it's actually instructive just to look where England is in comparison to other countries, because I'm indebted to the Centre for Social Justice, who's pointed out that across Europe, oversight and assessment of educational progress is commonplace, but in England, there is no such quality assurance. Now, in Germany, I'm told it's actually illegal to home educate your child. I would not want to go that far, Sir Mark. I think that is a step too far. And as I said earlier, those parents who do a great job and whose children progress well, I would just say thank you to and leave well alone. But I do think it is instructive how other countries in Europe are doing, and they are making sure there are regular progress checks on attainment, progress in their home language and in maths and so on. So for about 20 years, I was a school governor of my village school. And at one point, I was the safeguarding governor. And as such, I was required to read a lot of guidance from the Minister's Department. At the time, it was Keeping Children Safe in Education, Statutory Guidance for Schools and Colleges, September 2016. There may be more updated advice. And that advice, guidance, that statutory guidance to schools was very prescriptive. This was an area that was taken very seriously. If I quote briefly from this remark, it says, local authorities have a duty to establish as far as possible to do so the identity of children of compulsory school age who are missing education in their area. And there are various other pretty severe injunctions on what the school has to do. So I just find it curious that there is that significant body of safeguarding guidance for children who are in school, but none to speak of that can be properly enforced, as far as I can see, for children who are being home educated. Now, I also had a look earlier, before this debate, Sir Mark, at Article 28 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And that says that state parties shall recognise the right of a child to education with a view to achieving this right progressively. There's a requirement to make primary education compulsory and available to all, to offer different forms of secondary education, including general and vocational. I think that's an important point. It goes on to say that measures should be taken to encourage regular attendance at schools and the reduction of dropout rates, and that state parties should take this seriously so that it should contribute to the elimination of ignorance and illiteracy throughout the world. And we are a signatory to that, Sir Mark. I think that's a really important article, Article 28, in that convention, to which the UK is signed up to, as far as I'm aware. And so what I say to the Minister is, how do we enforce that right for those children who are being home educated by parents who can't read or write, or maybe aren't even making any effort to teach them English, for example, as I'll go on? I think we're in very serious breach, actually, and I think we've averted our gaze, I'm afraid to say, from an issue that is contentious because it may be inconvenient. The children don't vote, and the parents who have a different view do, and perhaps we're not doing what we should. So the responsibilities of for homeschooling are set out, as they are for every child, in Section 7 of the Education Act 1996, which states that the parent of every child of compulsory school age shall cause him, I think it should say, or her, personally, as the father of 3 daughters, to receive efficient, full-time education. Rather bizarrely, it says, though, it goes on to say later on, though, that they are not required to provide a broad and balanced curriculum and do not have to follow the national curriculum. So I was interested to see in a note from Central Bedfordshire Council, from whom I got a briefing before this debate, who state as follows, that the local authority has a legal duty under 437 of the Education Act 1996 to act if it appears that a child of compulsory school age is not receiving a suitable education, although the Education Act does not give powers to the authority to insist on seeing the child, visit the family home, or see the work that the child is completing. And I would say it's pretty challenging, Sir Mark, to assess how well that child is doing if you can't see the child, visit the family home, or see the work that the child is completing. Now, we know some local authorities do manage to do that, and that's tremendous, but I do worry that we don't give the local authorities the powers to make sure that every child is receiving, and I quote the Act again, an efficient full-time education which is suitable for that child, and I think that should concern us. Now, I'm also aware that if your child is in a mainstream school or an academy, I believe the school is expected to enter the children for national curriculum assessments. And there's also a statutory duty on all children to be in education or employment with training up to the age of 18, and I would agree with both of those requirements. But again, I think the reality is that is not happening for a number of home-schooled children. I'm also aware that some children whose parents claim they're being homeschooled are in unregistered schools, of which we also have a number. I read an article from The Economist last year which talked about a young man of 18 who'd been in one of these unregistered schools. I think his parents had claimed he was home educated. He'd had schooling sometimes for 14 hours a day. When he left at 18, he couldn't read or speak English. Now, are we really saying that's acceptable? I mean, that actually was an unregistered school, which Ofsted, do have a duty to do something about. But it's quite hard for Ofsted to get on top of this issue because a lot of his parents will say the child is being home educated. And what about the rights of that young person to read and speak, the mother tongue of their home country? I mean, do we care about these things or don't we? And as I look at the numbers of children in my own constituency, like my right honourable friend, the former Secretary of State, whose presence graces us here today, they've gone up very significantly. On the 15th of June 2015, in the 2015-16 year, there were 283 children in elective home education in my constituency. By 2020-2021, that had gone up to 493. And that's the most recent figure that I could get. And no doubt it's higher than that. I suspect the majority of those are probably in my constituency as well. I mean, how high are we happy for that number to go without really knowing what's happening? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000? Is that acceptable? Personally, I don't think it is. Now, as I look across this chamber, whatever political party we are from, I would say we are all concerned about the life chances of children. We're all concerned about ladders of opportunity. We're all concerned about social mobility, about the elimination of poverty. But how are we going to achieve any of those things when a significant number of our children are not having the education, which I think is their right? We talk about the rights of parents, and I believe in the rights of parents as a parent myself, but I do think children actually have the right to a proper broad-based education to enable them to achieve everything they're capable of achieving, which is why I would encourage the Minister to progress down the route that the Secretary of State has said she wants to do. Of course we need to do it sensitively. I don't want heavy-handed officials going into people's homes in an inappropriate manner. But it needs to be a decent, civilised conversation on how the child is progressing, and we cannot just afford to look the other way, as I believe we have done for far too long on this issue.